So this is kind of crazy. We didn't know they could do that back then.
Well, before coming out here, I asked ChatGPT, how old are some of the stories written down in the text in the Hebrew Bible? And at least according to ChatGPT, it's 10,000 years ago. So
Oh my God.
Something may have happened at that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very interesting finding. Oh, Sodom and Gomorrah, that's a great story. I'm working on this translation of the Hebrew Bible. I've got a Substack now. I've been putting out things every week, a chapter a week.
Yeah.
On my translation of the Bible. It's like 1,000 pages right now of commentary about the language and the grammar, the meaning, what's called the plain meaning of the text. Like there was a Noah with 3 sons and went on an ark. Yeah, so that's like my big project, but I'd like to do a smaller one about Sodom and Gomorrah and the figure of Lot. I think that's a really incredible story. I've spent about maybe 2 to 3 weeks looking at that. Lot, his virgin daughters, the men circling his house. They're asking to know him. He ends up, in a cave with his 2 virgin daughters. They get him drunk, and he sleeps with them, or they lie with him anyway. Yeah, and out come 2 kids at a certain point, and they become very important. Later on, they're the beginning of the messianic line. So it's a very intricate, tale with a very. I think you can make some cool conversations between some of the main personages in the narrative. There was a book called The Red Tent.
Can I ask you about the Lot? Like how old was that story?
Wow, that must be. Well, it's an explanation of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is around the Dead Sea. There was a conflagration of some sort there. Have any of your guests spoken about Sodom? What actually happened around the Dead Sea? It was quite catastrophic.
Well, tell us.
Well, the story of Lot. Yeah, I mean there was fire and sulfur pouring down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, it was the end of the plain. Yeah, so that's the southern part of the Dead Sea. It is a Dead Sea because of its high salt concentrations. It was kind of closed off from the coast. Yeah, so it's at least a description of what took place.
What do you think it's describing?
Well, I mean, my perspective is
a volcano.
It actually happened. Yeah, but people think a volcano. Some kind of volcanic activity.
It totally sounds like a volcano, right? And we know that there's been a bunch of those that have almost wiped people out entirely at certain points. The Toba volcano, that one?
No.
We got down to, I think we've looked this up before, but I want to say they think we might have gotten down to just a few thousand people.
On the whole planet.
Like 70,000 years ago. 70,000 years ago, there was a massive supervolcano that went off, and it, plunged the Earth probably into nuclear winter. And they think that our genetic line entirely of the human race on Earth came from this few thousand survivors.
Joe, can we take a
yes.
a break?
You gotta pee?
Yeah.
Yes. We'll be right back, folks.
Seriously.
We're back.
Yeah. So we were talking about the alternative.
Yes. Explain what you mean by that. Like that these things are happening in an alternative dimension.
Right. Yeah, I think they're happening in an alternative dimension. Like when you smoke DMT, you return to the same place each time. So there seems to be some reality, some DMT world that people enter into. And it's one of my volunteers, one of the subjects in the DMT research. He got a big dose one day, and then a few months later, he got another big dose. And he said that it was very interesting. He said things have just continued apace since his first exposure and his first entrance into that state, and things had gone on in the meantime, and he re-entered that world. So in that way, there's in that same manner, the world of the Hebrew Bible early on, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel, all that took place at some different level of reality, which gradually made its way into ours. And once it made its way into ours, there's the archaeological evidence, the first temple, second temple, and so on. So there is a transition between, our world and that world kind of merged. But in the beginning, it was an alternative dimension. It's the same God, I think, but different dimensions.
Is this your own personal conclusion?
Yeah. Wow. Well, when I was on the show last time, you're asking if I believe those things took place, and my answer then was I take it as if it were true,
Right.
And then I started to think, how I would do that, like in what world would that be true? It'd be a different world,
Right. I feel like I've always believed that they were trying to record something. I just didn't always trust that human beings were completely honest with their recollection of events. So that there's something that they were trying to write down. But was it really coming from God? Are these accurate events? What exactly happened with Noah and the ark? Like what really happened?
Well, three stories, three levels, two of each, then seven of, one pair or seven pairs of birds, of every living thing.
Yeah, but like how's he feeding them? Animals eat other animals. The whole thing's nuts. You would need a lot more rabbits. You need so many animals to keep just the lions alive.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. How's he getting them all from all over the world into his stupid boat?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are wrong.
Yeah.
But the story of him being told that some shit is about to go down and you probably should, find some way to restart your version of civilization somewhere. There's probably multiple like the flood myth that we whatever you want to call it, the stories of the flood that you get from Epic of Gilgamesh, that you get from Noah. It's not just those. There's many different cultures all throughout history have a flood story, right? So it's probably likely that some crazy shit went down.
There may have been, there most likely was a flood. So what do you learn from it? Like how do you do better, or on what basis do you rebuild? So I think there's different models. The biblical one is interesting because it's a lineage from Adam to Noah,
Right.
to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob and the tribes, and now.
So when you talk about things happening in an alternative dimension, like, is that what you think, like, the birth of mankind is as well, like Adam and Eve?
Well, I mean...
Pull this microphone up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
yeah,
it's okay.
yeah.
It just has an impact.
Yeah. The creation story. Man was created on the sixth day.
Right.
Along with mammals. Yeah, it's a cool story. It's stages. People say, well, 7 days, that's unlikely. Like that creation took place 7 times 24. I don't know, 148. Something like that. 148 hours, 168 hours. The whole world was created. But it's broken into stages. 7 stages. Which is one of the translations of the word that is usually translated day. It could also mean stage. It's the word yom. It could mean either a day, a period of time, a stage. So that's that's the answer that makes sense to me about the 7-day story of creation. Yeah. So man was created on the 6th day, and then was placed in the Garden of Eden, and those events took place. The stories themselves are just they're written down, and so people have been studying them for thousands of years. No mention of Lilith in the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
Where's the story of Lilith emerge?
Well, it comes from what's called midrash.
What's that?
Comes from a root, darash. It means to, explicate, to expand upon, to investigate. So what happened after Adam and Eve sinned? Did they have sex again? And they do have Cain and Abel and the ensuing stories. And then there's a third son, Shet, who is the inheritor of Adam's of his traits, his good traits and bad traits. He's like God as well. There's a distinct lineage that is spelled out. Lilith was a demon. That she slept with Adam after the sin of eating from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So there's a story that built up around the biblical story that they were separated. Adam and Eve were separated for a long period. And so who was Adam sleeping with? Well, it was expanded in the Midrash that there was a demoness named Lilith who slept with Adam for a couple hundred years. And then Adam and Eve reconciled. So Lilith is, she doesn't appear in the text of the Hebrew Bible as such. So nobody knows. There's a mythology that's grown around Lilith as well. Well, isn't there some festival, some music festival called the Lilith Festival?
Lilith Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's named after the spirit or the demoness who's.
You sure it wasn't like a lady named Lilith that she came up with it? Are we sure?
It was her neighbor, Lilith Smith.
Terence McKenna once said it best, that science asks of you one miracle. That's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
There's one miracle.
Yeah.
It really is kind of like a miracle.
Yeah.
If in the beginning there was nothing, and then God created the earth and the skies. And that's essentially what the Bible is trying to say. They're just doing it in a way.
And the Bible got it right. They got the order right.
Right.
I
think it's based on an understanding that people had achieved. Because if you think about the Bible, right, and if all these people are correct about the original history of sophisticated civilization, if the Randall Carlsons and the Graham Hancocks and the Robert Shocks of the world and the John Anthony West, if they're correct in the timeline of, like, say, the most sophisticated society that we are aware of, which is Africa, if those people that lived in Africa 30,000, 40,000 years ago in Egypt, if they created a society that was infinitely more sophisticated than anything that we had ever seen before, like, how did they do that? Who did that? And what was that like? Like, what the fuck was that like? What was that world like back then? I mean, have you ever really stopped and tried to think and imagine what was that world like back then? I mean...
Well, how about that you have a similar world in Central and South America where they also had built things many thousands of years ago that still, like, how the fuck did you do that?
Yeah. How'd you do that?
Easter Island. How did y'all make those things?
Yeah.
How in the world? And then move them?
Well, I think if those things go down and then people have to rebuild, I think it takes a long time before people figure out what happened. I think it takes a long time. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion that you see in the Bible comes from. Like, God made the earth and the sky and everything in like 6 days, right? And on the sixth day, he rested. Okay. What are they actually saying, though? You're getting things that are translated from an oral history of 1,000 years, and then they're writing it down in Aramaic, they're writing it down in ancient Hebrew, and you're getting it many, 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 many years later, long after.
Diluted and warped.
All kinds of. Think about what people are willing to do today to the Constitution. Today, with all the information that we have about the dangers of this. Think about what they're trying to do today. Now imagine what you would do if you had the real knowledge of the birth of the solar system, of the development of human beings, and the God energy of the universe, and you tried to translate it over an oral history because there's chaos, because there's no more cities anymore, and everyone's dead, and you're just like hunting and gathering as cave people, and you're trying to relay this origin story of mankind. and then it gets written down in parables, and it gets written down in Latin, and it gets translated over the years, and then people try. Okay, then they sit down and they look at it many years later, and they go, "What the fuck were they trying to say? Like, what were they trying to say?" Because so much of what they're trying to say, if you're really paying attention, like it seems like it's kind of laid out like the origins of the universe. If in the beginning there was nothing, like they're talking about the Big Bang. If these scientists all agree, how do they know that?
Then
back
there was
then?
light. That would be the Big Bang.
Why wouldn't they assume back then that God was always around? Why would they assume that God had to make everything? Why would they assume that there was a beginning and an end just because they have a beginning and an end? Is that rational? Why would they assume that? And why did everybody assume that? Maybe because they fucking knew. Maybe because at one point in time, whether it's 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, they had figured a lot of this shit out.
Well, someone figured something out for the pyramids and the way that they were built to be aligned so perfectly with a true north. And
just to be able to construct them. If those people were that smart, why wouldn't we imagine they had an understanding of the birth of the universe? Why wouldn't we imagine that they would have this bizarre understanding of the way morality and good and evil play out with human beings? Maybe they were right. Maybe they were right, but it all just got fucked up over the thousands of years after asteroid impacts and the thousands of years of the destruction of the advanced civilizations and the world going back into chaos and then slowly rebuilding. And you're rebuilding with these ancient texts that you find in clay pots in Qumran. And you ever seen when they translate like the Dead Sea Scrolls and they lay them out and they have to try to figure out which pieces go with which scroll, and they do it based on DNA. All this DNA is from this cow, so let's take this scroll from this cow skin and put it together and try to read what the fuck they said. It's incredible, but it makes sense. It makes sense if you buy into the idea that there's been a restart of civilization, and then you go back and say, okay, what is the history of the Bible? Like, how old is it? What's the oldest version? Like, what's the oldest version of the stories?
Version. Like, who knows?
Right, who knows? Version. Right. What was the original? Like, you're playing a game of Telegram, right, or telephone with over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
With who knows how many people. But if we've seen what the Egyptian people were able to build, what was that like? How sophisticated were they? And maybe what we're getting at in the Bible is just the longest game of telephone of a true story. It's just all kind of gumbled up in stories, and God's testing you and all this thing about, God telling this guy to kill his kid. Mate, it's just a little screwed up. But it's showing you that there are evil forces at play, and there are temptations. And you must resist
lessons
those.
in a story that you can understand.
Exactly.
And
but
that's
at the
why
heart of
7
it, there's
days,
some truth to it.
Because what is a day to God?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Is that a billion years?
Yeah.
1,000,000 years?
100 billion?
Who knows?
Who fucking knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
But it's presented in a way that you can digest it.
I'm in the middle of the audiobook of the Book of Enoch, and it's one of the wildest things I've ever listened to in my life.
It's weird.
Oh my God, it's so weird. When you realize that a lot of the people in the Book of Enoch are also in the Bible, and that it's one of the craziest stories. It's one of the craziest origin stories ever, that angels came down and bred with humans and made giants.
Right.
The giants destroyed the earth. Like, what is this story?
It's mostly in the Hebrew Bible. It's the story of what led to the flood. Yeah, the sons of Elohim.
What a strange concept, that angels came down and bred with humans.
It's a very weird idea. Well, there's different ways to look at translating B'nai Elohim. It might be, the first word, B'nai, means the sons of. So it kind of revolves on what's the meaning of Elohim. So it could be God with a big G, could be God with a small g, could be angels, could be dignitaries in a government like judges. Yeah, so the less far out kind of interpretation of that phrase or that term is, the sons of the mighty, the sons of the judges, the sons of the renowned people, as opposed to the sons of angels or the sons of God.
Okay, so how do you interpret the Watchers? What do you think that could be?
I think, well, they're not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. They are mentioned in the book of Enoch. That's a crazy book, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I started reading it, and I said to my wife, I can't handle this. It's too much.
It's because if that was left in the Bible, if they decided that that was like a part of the canon, that would change everything.
Well, in what way?
It's the craziest story ever. That these things came down and bred with humans and created giants, and the giants destroyed and consumed everything.
Yeah, those giants.
And consumed each other. Like,
yeah, bloodshed.
What kind of kooky story is this? Like, what is this?
Well, it's the reason for the flood,
right.
And all that. Yeah. So, things just got so bad, God said, I changed my mind.
It's like the further you go back, the crazier the story gets.
I know. Well, the Book of Enoch was written maybe 125 BCE. So it's pretty old. But some of the stories that originate, or that the origination of some of the stories in the Hebrew Bible go back, 10,000 years perhaps.
Wow. Wouldn't you have loved to be a fly on the wall 10,000 years ago to go, what were you guys writing down? What really happened?
What really happened? Well, I mean,
it seems like for sure something happened.
What?
Well, whatever the whole Jesus Christ thing was. It seems like that was a real event.
Right, as opposed to the flood.
The flood seems like a real event too. Don't you think the flood was a real event?
What about, let's see.
I think the flood was the Younger Dryas impact. I think likely, obviously. I don't know what I'm talking about. But my inclination is to believe guys like Randall Carlson, because it's a very compelling narrative. Like, what he's saying is, we pass through a comet storm. It happens this particular time every year. And there's been times in history where we've been hit. And it's very likely that this time period, this Younger Dryas impact time period, that could have been the end of whatever civilization existed at the time, and what we are is a rebuilding of it. Mm-hmm. We just kind of forgot about it. And it doesn't make sense that you could forget, like, how they built the pyramids, but they did. Like, it seems like there was really advanced people at one point in time.
Yeah.
Something horrible happened, and then it took a while for people to bounce back. And we're the direct linear progression of the people like from Mesopotamia and Iraq and all that. That's us now. But before that, there was probably something really wild.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the text's description of the generations from Adam to Noah, what civilization was like between the beginning and the time of the end. Yeah, I mean, it became filled with violence. And, God just, said, forget it. Yeah, so that's one way of looking at the Younger Dryas, I suppose. It's just what it looks like when God changes his mind.
Sure. That also could have been like the Yucatan impact, right? God's like, we can't get anywhere with these fucking dinosaurs everywhere. Just boom.
Yeah.
But he got tired of lizards running the world for he maybe gave it a couple 100 million years. Figure it out, guys. Mm-hmm. And then they have to reset.
Yeah, but what comes after us, I wonder? In 200 million years.
I think it's most likely digital.
Yeah.
I think we're transferring what the idea of what a life form is. What does a life form do? We want to think that it has to be just like us. And I don't think necessarily that's true. I think we might be giving birth to something we didn't anticipate would be a life.
Yeah, a very cool book I try to mention as often as possible is called The First and Last Men by Olaf Stapledon. And he talks about 19 species of man. And this is the first one. The story spans 2 billion years. It's this huge story.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's mostly through genetic engineering. Make people bigger, smarter, like brains that occupy a football field. That's one of the species of man. Yeah, so his thought is that it occurs biologically, through genetic manipulation.
Just over time, naturally?
After a while, it gets steered. Yeah, let me think. Yeah, it's all basically based on what people are, what people want. So there's one species that instead of love as kind of the core valued feeling, they have hate as their core valued feeling.
They just can't wait to hate.
Yeah. And that's one of the species that kind of goes through a period of, rise and then decline, obviously. It just couldn't sustain itself.
Well, you got to wonder, like, how long this is. If AI really is a thing, it really is a life, we've got to make a compelling argument why AI is bad and we are good.
Yeah,
because if people say, if you really want to be ethical and moral, this is a horrible take, but if you really want to be ethical and moral, you'd be like, people are like uniquely terrible. Like, if we just gave in and became digital life, we could ensure there'd be no more suffering.
How can you know that?
You can't. You can't. You can't know a vaccine is safe and effective. You can't.
You just have to try it.
You got to try it
and see what happens.
I think a bunch of people try it. I don't know how much further biological people can go while we're making digital people that are way better than us at basically everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too far away from being a reality.
The way I try to follow it is through a biblical lens.
Really?
Yeah, how does
what chapter are we in right now?
Yeah, well, good question. You read the prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. They just rage against the machine. I think it goes pretty far back. Yeah, so what's good and bad? What's right and wrong? How do we decide that? That's what I like about the Bible. I mean, obviously, I can make up my own mind about things, but it's nice having that kind of an option, that kind of a tradition to refer to when deciding what's good and bad. What you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be over 600, they're translated as commandments in the Hebrew Bible, but and those are what you do to live happily and attain a spiritual state close to God, prophetic, a state of prophecy. If it's a certain description of the world and how to interact with it, which is intended to have certain effects and discourage other, decisions. So this is good, this is bad, in terms of this will increase things in your life that are good, and this will decrease them. So it's a very interesting description of cause and effect. That's the way I see those so-called commandments. They're more of a description of how things are run. If you do this, then that'll happen. If you do this, then that'll happen.
Do you think that they were directly given to us by a God, or do you think that this is just the memories of how to keep society together that they have just eventually written down?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Does it come from outside of you or from inside of you?
Right.
Yeah. If it's available inside of you, but hidden away, then prophecy, or really, getting it correctly according to the text, would just be an uncovering or a stimulation of what's already inside of you, as opposed to,
it's you can achieve some sort of a state.
Mm-hmm. It's information latent. Could be in the DNA or whatnot, or it comes down, from a higher source.
But so when you're interpreting stories in the Bible, like Moses and the Ten Commandments, how are you are you imagining this event happening, or are you imagining what were they trying to record? What were they trying to remember? Because it seems like by the time they're writing it down, it's quite a bit after the actual event, for the most part, right?
For the most part, yeah.
So, what do you think they were? What do you think they were actually describing?
Well, we talked about this briefly last time I was here. Was this, if I believed in the reality of the Hebrew Bible, did those things really happen?
Right.
Yeah. And I said, well, it's a really consistent worldview and so on. And I thought about it some more, and I started thinking about it as as well. I was trying to think about it as comparable to the DMT state. When you're in the DMT state, it's just there, and it's very consistent, very real. Certain things happen there. And so I think the early version, I think what happened early on in the account of the Hebrew Bible was like the DMT world. It was a parallel level of reality, which was happening. And then slowly it began to you began to segue into this reality. For example, the destruction of the first temple, of the second temple, David's reign, Solomon's reign, the kings after them, the division of the land into, two countries. That is historical. But before that, it was also historical, but it was occurring at a completely different, independent level of reality. Does that make any sense? It's a cool way to look at answering the question, how much of this is real, especially from early on.
I see what you're saying, but it's always like, it seems like an interpretation of what happened. Like, what were these original events? Like, what was Adam and Eve? What was that? What was the Garden of Eden? There's so many of these stories where I would be fascinated to be there the day the dude wrote it down. Like, what were you guys? What were you talking about for hundreds of years before you wrote this down? Like, tell me what the stories were. How did they go?
Well, my way of dealing with those stories is to just take them at face value. Here's Adam. Here's Eve. Here's a garden. There's two trees that are very important. It's beautiful. Yeah, and then there was a serpent, spoke to Eve, took the apple, ate it, gave it to Adam. Yeah, and then out of the garden. Well, lots of people in the psychedelic community anyway, look at the tree of knowledge of good and evil as some indication of God being jealous and didn't want any competition, didn't want to be like, God did not want man to become like it, and part of that was keeping the two early people away from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not simply the tree of knowledge, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which I think is an important distinction, because once they ate from the tree, they were embarrassed because of their nakedness. And then they hid, thinking they could hide from God, and they didn't believe that before. They kind of went into good versus not good, good versus evil, as opposed to true versus false, which was their original state. So there was before their eating of the apple, or whatever the fruit was, they just lived in truth or falsehood. And then after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then they were embarrassed and tried to hide, made themselves tree-like coverings or from coverings from the leaves of large trees. Yeah, so you look at it as if it were happening. There was Adam, and then there's Eve. There's the serpent that speaks, and that's the chapters I was looking at very carefully the last month or so. Is what happens early on with Adam and Eve. It's a really very straightforward. Doesn't take much thinking really to put it together in a way that makes sense.
I think closed might have been a cheat code for people, not just to escape cold weather, but also to keep from just constantly having sex. Because people are stupid, and they need like some layers of clothes that they have to take off of each other. They can't be just wandering around naked all the time. People would be just like chimps. That would be ridiculous. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So we needed clothes in order to advance as society.
But can't you take off clothes whenever you want?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, but it's like you decide. Like, I don't want to feel that good. I don't want to be out there in the air. I don't want to be brushing up against naked people. We all made that decision a long, long time ago. I think when people became civilized, they realized, like, if we don't cover ourselves up, then people are too gross. They'll just be having sex with each other everywhere.
Yeah.
You got to get things done. We want to keep a society moving.
Right.
Wear some clothes.
Wear clothes. Well, that story could originate, or that that way of looking at things could originate, with Adam and Eve.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It also makes sense, like an intelligent hominid emerging would start to realize that, oh my God, self-awareness, look at my boobs, look at my dick, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Can't believe I'm out here naked. Because it's kind of becoming self-aware as opposed to like a chimpanzee. And as time would go on, it would become more self-aware. And if it happened over a relatively short period of time and it can kind of have memories of the past, that would make sense.
Yeah. Well,
it's got to emerge, right? Like if we came from lower hominids, which everybody kind of agrees, something had to emerge, this understanding of yourself, this thought about what you look like, this thought about what you sound like.
Right. Well, there's two kinds of enlightenment. There's what's called original enlightenment that a child is born with, like a newborn. And then there's enlightenment as an adult, and in between. It's much more fluid. Yeah, two kinds of enlightenment: original enlightenment that infants have and children, and then the enlightenment after you sit in a monastery and get whacked for years.
Right, the kids are born with it. They're born in a psychedelic state. They have no language.
No language, no sense of self.
They just speak with love and touch and need and hold. Yeah, kind of wild.
Yeah, that's original enlightenment. Just happy or sad or whatever. But
isn't that crazy? You're born perfect.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're born simpler anyway.
Well, yeah. As long as people are taking care of you, it's perfect.
Yeah. Well, the Hebrew word for perfect and for simple are pretty similar. Noah is described as a perfect man, pure, complete. Yeah,
So,
those same word.
That's another good story. Okay. What do you think was going on with that story? Like, what is the origin of the story of Noah and his ark and his family and all the animals on the boat?
Yeah. Well, I think it was taking place in that alternate universe. It may have taken place on the planet. I don't know. I'm, looking at, why we don't have any clear archaeological history story. About what happened during the time of Noah, if there was a time of Noah. It's useful because Noah came from Adam and Eve, and he and Noah and his family were the only survivors of the flood. The first thing Noah did, got drunk after the flood.
The first thing
he did, he planted a vineyard, grapevine, drank. He exposed himself in the tent. One of his grandkids reported it and made a laughingstock of him.
Oh, really? He got canceled? Noah got canceled?
Yeah, took off his clothes.
Really?
Drunk.
Wasn't he like 600 years old too?
He has first child at 600, I think.
That seems real.
Well, he may have lived a lot of people wonder, why did people live, in the Bible anyway?
Right.
How did people live 900 years? Well, they did.
Right. But that's also why people question what the origin of the story is. That's why. Can you hear things like that? You're like, wait a minute, how old was he? 600 years old? Come on, man.
His first child.
He's just a regular dude.
Yeah.
His first kid when he was 600.
The last one he was 830 or so.
Oh, that seems logical.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Why are you laughing?
Maybe.
Really, it could
Listen,
be true. Why not?
If people lived normally to be 600, would that be any weirder than living to be 100? No. Like, what if something happened? What if something happened and our lifespan just went... Brrr.
Yeah. Well, the final species of man lives 35,000 years.
Gee, that's a long time to be in a bad relationship. Imagine 35,000 years of getting yelled at.
Well, they... That would be bad. But
I mean, I'm saying 35,000 years would be awesome if you have great friends and your life is together. But can you imagine 35,000 years of fuck this place? That would get tired.
Well, the point that those people tried to attain when they lived 35,000 years was this group telepathy of around the whole planet.
Neuralink.
Right.
Yeah.
That was their goal.